back, everyone. Just a pretty basic show today. Didn't have time to do more than this, but I wanted to at least get to this, and then Sunday and next week is a pretty jam-packed week for us here, of course. I wanted to react to Michigan's punishment and also give a Nebraska recruiting update. This should just be a quick 30-minute show. I will only be answering to Super Chats consequentially. I hate to say it, but those will be the only chats that I'll probably give the time of day, just because this will be a very short show. But I finally had time to get around to this, and I want to talk about the sign-stealing penalties, what this means, my thoughts on it, some other people's thoughts on it, and even sort of a rant. A little bit of ranting for sure, because I think that what has happened here is a lot of people were misled. A lot of people were misled. Others were not. I think it's hilarious in looking at how like Michigan and Ohio State fans kind of portray each other on Twitter and on social media as both being like they portray each other as like the dumbest and worst fan bases alive. And while there are certainly some pretty terrible and dumb fans from both the Michigan and Ohio State camp, I've mostly had pleasant interactions with them. I mean, at least everyone who's been around on my channel for a while knows that I am a Michigan fan who's primarily earned a lot of my income at the behest of Ohio State and Nebraska fans. So that's kind of a fun detail about me. But I want to talk about this because of how fascinating it is, the reaction to it, and the fact that there was just this very astroturfed opinion that Michigan was going to get hammered. I mean, I love using the word astroturfed because I think it's such a toxic, it's a word full of just like, of that black goo in the cartoons where the superheroes would tell you don't touch it or it could kill you. It's so rancid and full of such emotion, and it sounds something that can only be it sounds like a word that can only be used in an intelligent way. So I love using the word astroturfed, and I have finally found a way to use the word astroturfed. That's what this opinion of the hammer coming was. It was astroturfed. It started in these circles with guys like Buckeye Scoop, Kirk Barton, Ken Stickley, a bunch of guys who, honestly, I don't claim to be an insider. They have as much knowledge of inside Ohio State or inside college football as I do, and yet they claim to be insiders. That's red flag number one when watching different college football shows, especially ones that aren't like Josh Pate, Joel Klatt, who don't have the privilege of interviewing members of coaching staffs. Like, they're not that close to them. So a smaller channel that isn't quite their size, but is able to, I would say, provide some type of keen insights, if possible, would be George Weister's college football show, for example. The famous Oregon tight end covers the sport. I think is a part of, I should know, as I've had him on the show, but he's involved with TV and involved with media, and he's interviewed coaches up and down, whether Dabo Swinney, Dan Lanning, still pretty close to the Oregon program, enjoyed his time there. He is a smaller channel where if he said he has inside information, I would believe him, because he has made certain connections, and I could reasonably conclude from his connections to keen coaches that, okay, yeah, this guy might know something. These people, I'm just going to say, with all due respect, the people, not the ones who believed that Michigan was going to get a ban or they were going to get hit with a bus, not the people who believed that, not even people who came up with some pretty, I would say, reasonable reasons as to why Michigan could maybe get destroyed. I'm talking about the people who, even when it became clear and even when it was said over and over and over again by Pete Thamel or Ross Dellinger or Michigan inside the athletic department or others, like Josh Pate, for example, who, again, has connections and an understanding. He has access to the sport in a way that I don't, in a way that I one day hope to have. And when they are all telling you the same thing, and we're getting closer and closer and closer to the day where a punishment's going to be announced, and then these people don't just back down or say, okay, maybe we were wrong here, but the Buckeye Scoop, Nevada Buck, the Justin Spiro, all of those different types, what they do is they double down. See, what was really hilarious about this whole thing was the idea that Michigan couldn't have success without cheating. Now, Michigan, you know my thoughts on this. Michigan cheated. So if Michigan did get hit with a harsher penalty than this, well, I think that there wouldn't be any right to complain, really. In fact, I kind of think it's pretty stupid that they're trying to appeal this. Stupid in the sense of, ideally, you would expect responsibility to a certain degree, but logistically, I understand why you would do it. You don't want the fine. You want everything to be as easy as possible. So from that, I absolutely get it. I just, when I look at Michigan and their history, and the fact also that, look, having a, whatever Ohio State win streak had over Michigan, you had it from 2012 to 2019. That is a 8-game win streak. And then from 2004 to 2010, that was like a 7-game win streak. To have that win streak and then to think that would always be the case that is insane, especially in a rivalry involving two blue bloods. You then have the idea, again, to circle back to what I was bringing up earlier, that Michigan can never be good. That they're just, I see this all the time. Oh, 7-5, 8-4 program without cheating. 7-5, 8-4 program without cheating. Yeah, Michigan's had some down years for sure, but they won 10 games in 2006. Even in 2011, with Brady Hoke's dysfunction inheriting Rich Rod's dysfunction, 10 wins in 15, 16, 18. They won 9 games in a super stacked, deep 2019 season, the season that I could only wish college football would have every year with such strong quality of teams. Don't believe me? Watch 2019 Ohio State. They would have beaten 2024 Ohio State by probably 3 touchdowns or something of an absurd degree. LSU, same thing. Alabama with Tua healthy, same thing. That Clemson team, probably same thing. That Ohio State team could have beaten Michigan by 50 if they truly wanted to that year. Just absolutely, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd how deep that season was. But even more absurd is this idea that Michigan couldn't have success, that they couldn't beat Ohio State without this. We already saw this before in 2023 when Jim Harbaugh was suspended, and in my mind deserved to be suspended. He did. You had to punish Michigan somehow for actively cheating. If Michigan was going to continue to play the sport that year and not be shut down, something from their staff had to be taken away. Stallions and probably someone else to keep the peace. And the Big Ten did that. I thought that was the proper move. They went out and they kicked Penn State's rear like it was just another day. They escape Maryland, and then they play against Ohio State without their head coach, and with Ohio State entering the matchup with what I thought was good energy, with poise, with a confidence about them. Ryan Day called his best game against Michigan, and they lost. They just did. So we already saw this play out. And then Last year's game against Michigan rolls around. It rolls around. And Ohio State comes out with the dumbest game plan I've ever seen. Michigan wins. You know the whole story. And these accounts, what they do is before Michigan wins last season, they're talking about like a 1-year postseason ban, most of them, or maybe 2 years, or that's what they're talking about as the hammer, ultimately. But then, and this is what's hilarious, after that game occurs, the punishments are all of a sudden doubled. Like now we're talking about like, certainly a 2-year ban, maybe even a 3-year ban. We're going to see Michigan get the heaviest penalties since Penn State. Like really? You're going to compare the penalties that Penn State football received from and ultimately, I think postseason bans are stupid anyway. And I think a lot of what's been done to Paterno's history is also pretty bad. But Jerry Sandusky was unironically evil. He wasn't just this corrupt, overzealous staffer who wanted his team to win. And again, what Stalions did was wrong. I hope that he's never allowed on Michigan's campus again. But he's not the same person as Jerry Sandusky. It came across as cope. And then you continue down the road, and the opinion of these accounts is that these punishments are going to only get worse and worse and worse, when the consensus opinion is, hey, actually no, it's just whether or not Sharon Moore is going to be banned from the sport or not, and outside of that, everything else is kind of intact for Michigan. That was kind of it. And here we are. Wonderful. Isn't it just wonderful? I don't know what to think about some of these accounts. Well, I know what to think about them. I think they're idiots, personally. You can't, I mean, it's one thing to be me and say, hey, this is what I think is going to happen. And I didn't talk about it that much because I didn't feel comfortable talking about it that much. Why? Because I don't know a whole lot. I'd like to think I do. I'd like to think I'm smart. I think that I'm right in some instances. I mean, hey, there were people picking Notre Dame to beat Ohio State in last year's national championship game. I didn't do that. There were people who thought that Tennessee was going to roll into Ohio Stadium and blow out Ohio State when Ohio State had one of the most ineffective offensive lines that I've ever seen them field out, and that was their only weakness. And Tennessee had a worse O-line and was so much worse at every other position. There were people who thought that Vegas thought that Michigan was going to beat Illinois last year. I didn't think so. I happen to be right on that. I've also been wrong on things. I thought that Michigan last year was going to make a deep playoff run in the preseason. I thought that Nebraska was going to win 10 games in 2022, that they were going to win 9 last year. I was wrong on that. However, I would like to think that at the end of the day, I'm not an expert, that I know a thing or two, and I think I've done a decent job with this channel. These people peddle the same thing over and over again and tell you with confidence that they're right on everything. And then when they're called out or when they're wrong, they move on. So Justin Spiro, Buckeye Scoop, Nevada Buck, all of you different accounts, you were wrong. You were absolutely wrong. And it's a very shameful thing to be wrong about, because at the end of the day, you were conning one of the biggest and best fan bases in America, the biggest fan base in America of Ohio State, one of the best, and you were conning another great fan base of another proud program in Michigan State. Ken Recker, thank you for the $2 super chat. Fun fact, Ken Recker's my dad, actually. So thank you, Dad, for giving me $2. I really appreciate it. He's a Michigan State fan. He's furious about this whole thing. But he accurately predicted from the get-go that Michigan wasn't going to get much of a punishment. Why is that? Because he understands how things work. He just does. Like the NCAA has been waning in power, not waxing over the past decade. He can put 2 massive puzzle pieces the size of my hands together that if name, image, and likeness deals can't be enforced, how in the heck is Michigan going to get hit with a bus? You just, it doesn't make sense. He's pretty smart, I would say. Don't want to talk too much about my family and personal matters of my family on the show, but if you are a Michigan State or Ohio State fan, be like my dad. Hate Michigan, loathe Michigan, all you want, loathe them, but don't let your own fandom get in the way. Don't do it. Just don't do it. It's counterproductive. It's like me saying that Michigan this year is going to go 12-0. Like, is there a path for that? Yeah. And I think there was a path for Michigan to get harsher penalties than what they received today. But is it likely? No, it's not. Michigan's probably a 9-3, 10-2, 8-4. I mean, there's a wide range of outcomes. So I'm going to say 9-3, 10-2 team this year. And I might be overselling it. They could be 8-4. You got to be careful with this stuff. You really do. And I know I haven't gotten to exactly the direct penalties or the show cause or the hefty fines, and we'll ultimately get to that. But I wanted to open up really talking about this, and make sure, if you haven't already, to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, so that way you can get notified whenever we go live. And if you do have something you want to say it in the chat. Again, this is a pretty brief show. We're going to get off here at probably 8. So if you really want me to read what you have to say, a super chat would probably be best. But let me look at what everyone's been saying in the chat. There's just a lot of debate in the chat. And look, so this is my opinion on everything before we really get to the CBS Sports article that has all the different punishments and details here. My opinion of this whole thing is Michigan cheated. The penalties levied initially in 2023 when they suspended the head coach, Jim Harbaugh, that was pretty deserved. I also understand why people would think that Michigan's 2021 through early 2023 run had a lot to do with the sign stealing stuff. I get that. And I think that to a certain degree, Michigan probably got some type of advantage from that. Otherwise, why would they be doing that? It'd be pretty useless. But I also think that Michigan made a lot of legitimate staff improvements and development improvements as the Harbaugh era went on. I also believe that Michigan's 2020 exit from the game helped in a way where it's no longer an annual beatdown of Ohio State and you get that mental rest. And I also think that paired with the fact that Ryan Day was probably the first Ohio State coach of the 21st century to basically say, yeah, well, we can use Michigan as like our pillow, which I don't think Jim Tressel or Urban Meyer would have ever said something like that to Michigan's head coach, because that was in the whole like Zoom call situation. I think that represented a kind of natural flip in things, and then Michigan checking out of the 2020 game further emphasized that switch. And you saw it in 2021, and even more so, I think, in 2022 and last year in 2024, where Ohio State, like, they can't process the idea that Michigan can even play with them, let alone beat them. And that's pretty concerning. But those are my opinions, really. I think it's kind of in the middle of both extremes that, yeah, Michigan cheated and they should be punished, and they were punished. I actually think they kind of got off light. I was expecting Sharon Moore to get a 4-game suspension, not a 2-game suspension, a 4-game suspension this year. It's really a 2-game suspension. I mean, don't tell me that next year's suspension against Western Michigan is something that's even probably going to hold. I highly doubt it. And I thought that Michigan's fine. The fine they received isn't even an actual fine. They just can't access money from postseason play. So they're not giving money to anyone. They're not. So it's interesting. That's all I'm going to say. Like, ultimately, Michigan was guilty of cheating, but I think that everyone with a brain has sort of known that since all the details were broken in the 2023 season. Like, I think I said a few days after it broke, like, hey guys, yeah, Michigan did something wrong. They did something wrong. That's not news to me at all. They did something wrong. So those are my thoughts on that. And we're getting straight up brawls in the chat here. It's just insane. And I will tell you too. I'll tell you guys too. I mean, by me probably not talking about this all that much, I probably haven't gotten the same viewership from Ohio State and Michigan fans that I used to. I used to get more viewership back in 22, 21, 23. I used to. Don't get it that as consistently anymore. Part of that's me because I'm broadening my audience, but still, I mean, it's crazy. The fact that some people's channels were only about Michigan's punishment was insane. It was absolutely crazy. Very crazy. Oh well, though. Oh well. We move on. We really move on. Just looking at these chats is so interesting. It's very fascinating here. So let me tell you what happened, like the penalties, the full list of penalties. Let me show that. Just looking at the chat, guys, and all I got to say is be civil. Please be civil. Like, don't threaten to kill people over this. I mean, I can tell you guys that what Michigan did was wrong, and they definitely got off easier than they would have 10 or 15 years ago. But I can also tell you from like watching their game last year against Ohio State or the prior year, when even, Jack Sawyer, Ohio State player, passionate Ohio State player, definitely a guy who will be biased toward him, said that, Michigan won fair and square. And in parts, it looks similar to even Ohio State and Michigan games from 21 and 22. The difference is Ohio State in 23 and 24 just had a defense, and they didn't in 21 and 23 and 22. It's been a point of contention between these two fan bases ever since it broke, and I understand why. But I hoped that last year's Michigan-Ohio State game and then the national title would fizzle that a bit, because that would then show, like, hey, yeah, Michigan actually did build their team to better stop Ohio State, and it wasn't all due to the signs. And then Michigan could see through the national title run, like, hey, yeah, Ohio State's actually a tough team. They're very well coached. They're one of the best programs in the country. Show some respect to them. That didn't happen, though. I hope that this changes that, but I cannot guarantee that it will. Can't guarantee that. I see some people, I know that some people are really going to not like my middle ground take, but I've held this take since really October, November, whenever it broke in 2023. I'm not going to abandon my take. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to. I'm going to hold on fast to it. So Michigan, they got, hit with 3-game suspension for Sharon Moore. Ultimately, when you look at it, Sharon Moore, he deleted the texts, and you get the whole deal with that. He'll miss Michigan's Week 3 matchup against Central Michigan and the opener against Nebraska, but will coach Week 2 against Oklahoma. You know how weak the NCAA is? You know how weak and powerless they are? They're so weak and powerless that they accepted Michigan's proposal for a self-imposed 2-game suspension for Brycen Moore, where they picked the weeks, the games in which he will be suspended. That is how weak and ineffective the NCAA is. That weak, that effective. They came out and said, well, there were grounds for a postseason ban, but we decided not to. No. They're just aware that they can't enforce anything, which is actually pretty bad for the sport. It's pretty bad that they can't really enforce all that much. They are pretty powerless and pretty toothless. But there is a way in which the punishments they gave Michigan, if there is more authority granted to the NCAA in the future, if they can regain that, or if there is a new enforcement body of college football with new rules such as a salary cap, and we get more control of the sport, and it's not as chaotic as it is now in the future, how they laid out the punishments, the strategy that they used to discipline Michigan could actually be quite effective. This is what Tom Fornelli talked about on the Cover 3 podcast's live reaction to the Michigan sign-stealing penalties. So I'm going to link this article down in the description, down in a pinned comment or a reply to the pinned comment. It's by Cody Nagel and Matt Zenitz. It's about Michigan's penalties, among them being Jim Harbaugh receiving a 10-year show cause, hefty fines, mostly from postseason revenue. So Michigan could be missing out on up to 36 million dollars in postseason revenue. So they're not being fined as in money's being taken away from them, but if they reach the playoffs, they will not be awarded money. So it also goes for a bowl game. So it probably should be rephrased by a lot of these talking heads that Michigan hasn't received a fine. They're probably doing that to a certain degree for clicks, or maybe they just don't notice it. It should be put in more complex but also more clarifying language that Michigan isn't being fined, which also shows a little bit of the NCAA's toothlessness. It's that money is just being withheld from them. Taking money away from someone is a much stronger show of force than just not giving money to them. And what the NCAA doing is the latter, not the former of taking money away. Brycen Moore is also being issued a 2-year show cause order, and yet he's somehow allowed to coach with that 2-year show cause order, which again, I think is an example of the toothlessness of the NCAA. They are like an old person who lost all their teeth and they don't have their dentures in, or whenever they try to speak, their dentures like shoot out. They have nothing. And it's honestly, I didn't expect it to be this week. I didn't. And I thought that Michigan would not receive a postseason ban. I thought a 2-year ban I thought was basically impossible. Thought a 1-year ban was very improbable. I was always of the opinion that Michigan would receive a large fine. They didn't even get that. They just have a large amount of money withheld from them if they reach the playoffs, which, I mean, could be the same thing, but only if they reach the playoffs. And at that point, that season is already a success regardless of the fines. And it would hurt more if Michigan's donor situation wasn't as good as it is. Not saying that it doesn't hurt at all, because that plus the 25% reduction of official visits is going to hurt some in recruiting. Michigan will have to compensate for that by, hopefully, from their perspective, getting a generous donation and being able to overpay, I think, for some recruits in order to compensate for the lack of visiting time, because that matters. Relationships still matter in college football. They're not always the closers that they used to be. A lot of that's now the checkbook, but relationships and reaching out and at least having a conversation, I think especially in a post-COVID world, I think that means a lot. And you see that with some schools that don't exactly throw out cash, but they have excellent relationship builders and passionate recruiters and people who are really involved in the sport and really involved in their team, not just there as a job, but as their passion in college football. Again, the NCAA, I think, possibly laid a great groundwork for the future of college football enforcement, but as of right now, I don't know what to tell you other than the fact that it's pretty toothless. And this is a point where I'm going to say Michigan definitely got lucky in the sense that, well, it was right place, right time. At the end of the day, Michigan happened to receive these punishments and happened to cheat in an era where the NCAA just wasn't that powerful. Straight up. We got another super chat here, so let me check that. Let me check that before we move on here. Where was the other super chat? Come on. I don't want to miss it. Franklin Fanatic, thank you for the $2 super chat, says Franklin for commissioner. You know, Franklin has something I appreciate about James Franklin, actually, is that he's been very outspoken about college football having a commissioner, and they need one. College football needs authority. They do. They need authority right now. Today was a brilliant example of why college football needs authority. A very brilliant example of why they need it. It was. College football needs authority because a school right now can, I don't know. I'm not going to say that a school can just like cheat and get away with it, because your coaches will be let go. They'll leave. They won't be able to coach in college, that whole deal, and that can have an effect. But outside of that, you're not like, it's very hard to punish people. It's very hard to punish schools beyond that. And that means that, you know, you can quickly rebound from that. So it's interesting, honestly. I'm probably going to talk about this more tomorrow and more of my thoughts on this, just because this is kind of me winging it in a massive sense, just giving my instant reaction, my passionate reaction. I've already gone way over my own time limit here. I'm not going to be able to talk about the Nebraska commit. I'll talk about him. I'll probably briefly mention him tomorrow at some point. Or maybe even, maybe tomorrow. Wanted to talk about him, but just don't have the time. I want to talk about everything in college football, and at the end of the day, I don't always have the time to do so. So, you know, got to make sure that you don't try and cover every base, or you don't promise things that you can't deliver on. It's an important lesson. I mean, so I was just looking at a comment in the chat before I get out of here from Wolvergeek, who said, I said this in your Discord server, but I said if Harbaugh and co were still on the staff, the NCAA would have gone forward to slap them with that postseason ban. Yeah, I think that if Michigan kept the 2023 staff, I think you're certainly looking at Jim Harbaugh like being suspended for 6 games, or being suspended for like a whole season, and then probably a 1-year ban, or even possibly a 2-year ban. It's crazy how this whole thing went down. And again, to those accounts out there who who kept milking this when it was clear that it was up, shame on you. I mean, Now, now what they've done, what these accounts have done, is they got Ohio State fan and Michigan State fans' hopes up, and understandably so, on the fans' parts of hoping that Michigan would get punished. They got their hopes up for nothing. That's what they did. They conned some of them, and that's a shame. It's horrible. It's like, look, it's like Michigan fans listening to Michigan coaches last year, and there were talks from like the players about how the defense is going to be like just as good if not better than last year's, and then it comes out and it's a complete disaster against Texas, and it barely holds on against USC. I mean, even in November, you have Michigan lining their defensive tackles up at outside linebacker. Like it's crazy. It's insane. I hope that after this, it's probably unrealistic. I mean, I've noticed this with the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, that it's more hateful now than it ever has been, and I think it's flamed by a lot of things that aren't related to football. So I'm gonna shut up about those outside factors, but I think some of you may catch where I'm going with this. But it also just comes from the standpoint that they're both rivals, and they naturally are going to hate each other. And then just the chaos and uncertainty, I think, has really rattled both fan bases. So from the cheating standpoint for Michigan, I think that whole thing made a lot of Michigan fans uncertain about their achievements and uncertain about their accomplishments. Not all, but a lot of them. I know it did for me for a little bit, and then Michigan went on that run, and I was kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm not that uncertain. But I mean, even then, I mean, there's a little bit of a part of me, I'm not going to lie, that after that is a little bit uncertain, because it's going to be hard to replicate a run like that again. And I wish it was a run that did not have some type of, run that didn't have a scandal attached to it. I wish that was the case, but it's not. It's not the case. However, to go to the Ohio State side, I think that whole thing in the new era of college football has made Ohio State fans who were raised in the 21st century uncertain about their invincibility. Like Ohio State was invulnerable in the 2000s and 2010s because they were so ridiculously ahead of the rest of the Big Ten in every way. Recruiting, development, they were ahead of the curve, and they had legendary coaches. Now, I think they still have a legendary coach in Day. Like, straight up, I think Day's amazing. However, this is not the 2000s and 2010s anymore. Like, you are not invulnerable. You aren't. Oregon, USC, Michigan, they all have shown over anywhere from the past year to 2 or 3 years, or USC in its history, that they can recruit and develop at your level. They can do that. They can, in the case of Oregon and Michigan, they have beaten you with their current staffs. And who's to say that USC can't if Lincoln Riley figures out defense? Who's to say, like, Penn State poaching Jim Knowles from Ohio State doesn't happen 5 years ago? That never happens 5 years ago. And just this year, it did. It did. So I think it's college football's chaos, the uncertainty that comes with it, Michigan cheating, Ohio State not having won the Big Ten in a while, and Michigan having that unusual win streak against them. All of that just makes this whole thing toxic. All of it does. And now I'm excited for the game. I'm excited for the banter in that week. I think it's going to be a tight one. I think it's going to be a close one. Straight up. And I think that now that this whole thing is done, I mean, Michigan's appealing it. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow, but that's not going to do all that much. I imagine the NCAA will hold, Michigan's punishments will hold, and we're really done with this whole thing. We are. Michigan will either somehow get lighter punishments, which would be, I mean, again, proving my point, the NCAA is toothless, or the same punishments will apply, and that's that. Yeah. It's what's happened. At least we see a Nebraska fan in here. Max Ellis asks, Sam, do you think more teams start to cheat because the punishment is light and the NCAA is toothless? No, actually. And the reason I would say no is because Michigan had their greatest coaching staff and possibly greatest team of all time. And because they cheated, instead of probably following up that year with another playoff appearance and maybe Big Ten championship, they went 8-5. And now their coaching staff is an unknown. I would tab it as a weakness. And most programs could not survive that. I mean, Michigan, because they're a blue blood and they have a mega donor and they naturally recruit well, just at like a baseline top 15 level, they can recover from that better than most programs. So if anyone is going to be cheating more, it's going to be your blue bloods, and it's going to be your teams with a bunch of money. But even then, you know, I don't know. I would be inclined to say probably not. I mean, why would you cheat when you can pay an entire roster $100 million and that's not cheating? Like, so then the question also has to be asked, are teams going to be as dumb as Connor Stallions was? Are they going to be that stupid? I don't think so. Maybe one will, maybe two will, maybe even three, but en masse, no. Absolutely not. You can, legally, no one is stopping you. You can pay an entire roster $100 million if your donors want to, and declare it fair market value, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is why the whole paying players was Pandora's box. Because now Texas in 2 years could be spending $100 million on their roster, and they're the number one spender of the sport in this scenario. And Ohio State, for example, and Michigan are, let's say, they're the number 4 and 5 spenders, respectively. But they're only spending $40 million. Well, then Texas is going to kick their little butts all day. They're going to kick them all day, despite the placement between them being so small, but the gap being yet so wide. I can totally see that happening. So under that circumstance, why would you cheat? If you're Ohio State, paying your roster $90 million and getting all the good players and soaking everything up and just drastically outspending everyone, it's legal. Now, the reason no one will do that is because the minute that happens, then everyone will crack down and we're immediately going to have salary caps. Your best strategy to ensuring that you can outspend everyone is just drastically increasing your spending on the roster through a steady enough pace to where you can chalk it up to roster inflation and roster cost inflation, rather than a dramatic spike, which everyone will say after, it goes from $40 million for the top roster to maybe like 120. It triples in price. Then everyone looks at that and says, yeah, we can't afford that. We're all going to come together against this one team, and we're going to institute a salary cap so that we don't lose 70-0 to Team X, who's outspending them 3 times the next top spender and 10 times almost everyone else. So no, I don't think that more teams will start to cheat. I do think that more teams will start to be aggressive with things that aren't cheating, but that are sketchy. So paying players, I think that the teams who are already aggressively paying players, because it's legal, are going to pay them even more aggressively because they just know they can't get punished at all. So take from that what you will. Okay. I have to go. Who cares what's happening? College football is almost back. I'm sure we can all agree it's the best feeling ever. Yes. As Cole Trickle says, football starts in 8 days, and then no one cares about this at all. We just need to lock in mentally and go back our brand of football the weekend after of Thanksgiving. Yeah. What Ryan Day and Ohio State need to do to beat Michigan is they need to play to their strengths and target Michigan's weakness. And the only season they've really done that was 2023, when that defense was 2021 Georgia level, but like a lot of defenses that are at Georgia's level, I mean, defense in general, it's easier to get a defense through the pass than the run, but especially the case with the elite defenses, because your best defenses always have the strongest fronts, not necessarily the strongest secondaries. What Ohio State did that year is they went deep a ton, and it worked. It worked to perfection, actually, I'd argue. The fact that they were able to do that against Michigan's defense when Michigan didn't make a ton of mistakes was pretty impressive. They need to get back to that game plan. That's what they need to do. And if they do that, if they not saying they're going to be as good as the 2023 team, but if they use that same strategy against this Michigan team, they should win. Because unlike in 2023, when I would argue Michigan was anywhere from a field goal to probably 10 points better than Ohio State, Ohio State this year I think is going to be anywhere from 5 points to probably 14 points or 2 touchdowns better than Michigan. Could be. I'll be more conservative and say anywhere from like 3 to 14 points, but still, you get the point. Ohio State should be better than Michigan this year. They should. It hasn't stopped Michigan from beating them in the past, but that should help the Buckeyes. And Saray and Taylor slots. Nebraska got Torrey Pittman today, another 5-star out of the 2027 class. I wish I could have covered that, but we've already been live for almost 50 minutes talking about this. So I will cover that either tomorrow or Sunday. By Sunday, it could be late news, but I think a timely video of me maybe, breaking down some of his film or talking about Nebraska recruiting in general tied in with that would also be good. So I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you for the 50 concurrent viewers. All of you who are with me right now, like the show, hit the notification bell, and if we can get 50 concurrent viewers this Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, consistently throughout the whole show, where, on an average basis, we get 50 concurrent viewers, I'll do a giveaway. Like, I will give away a $25 Visa card to someone. Like, they'll just get straight up $25. If we can get 50 concurrent viewers on my Sunday show at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, yeah, we can do that. Totally. So, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you all. We're trying to build something special here. This was not an instant reaction, but a reaction when I had the time. Thank you so much. Again, hit the notification bell. Go to my page, YouTube page, and make sure to go through the podcasts that we have, all the team podcasts, and hit the notification bell for whichever team podcast exists that is representative of your team, and that way you can get notified whenever I talk about your team, because I want to make college football with Sam personal. Want to make it a mission to make it personal, to where your team can be covered and talked about on a national show in a way that doesn't feel national broad, like I'm above everything, but where I'm with you. And I appreciate you, Spartan Dog. I love the fact that Michigan State fans love me. It's incredible. So thank you, Spartan Dog. Enjoy having you on here. I enjoy having you all here. 70-inch flat screen giveaway. Nice. I wish. I hope one day I'm wealthy enough to give away things like that live on the show. I promise. If this one day produces 6 figures for me, there will be a massive giveaway like that where, hey guys, tune in tomorrow for a chance to get like a massive flat screen TV. You guys are awesome. I'll see you soon. There'll be more content tomorrow, more content Sunday, and next week we're going to